So this is a little bit apart from the informative stuff that I try to do, but mostly what this video is about is how not to get numb to numbers. I know it's pretty easy for a lot of guys to get wrapped up with some of the lifters they see on YouTube and stuff like that, like Pete Rubish is a good example. You just have some guys who are barely reaching into their potential right now, who are looking at him pulling over 900 pounds and be like, wow, I can't see myself ever doing anything close to that. And even when they hit something like a personal best, they might not be as proud of that as they should be. There's a couple ways to avoid that, and that's partially just remembering where you come from. I guess I just want to share this, I don't want to call it a story, but just where I started progression-wise. I had always been interested in strength and getting a little bit bigger from the time I was fairly young, like 10 to 12 years old. Obviously, I'm like 5'5", 5'6", and back then I was like in the 4-foot range, so I was a pretty small kid. And when I had started off doing anything, I wasn't allowed to lift weights until I had hit high school. So until I started lifting with high school football. So prior to that, pretty much all I could do was do bodyweight exercises. So even back in elementary school, I was doing stuff like pull-ups, push-ups, that sort of thing. So I had a decent base from that sort of thing. And then I just remember going into 9th grade football, and pretty much what they had you start off doing is you come in on the first day and you test, and that essentially, based on how strong you were, that essentially assigns you to the lifting group that you were going to be with for the rest of your time while you were on that team. I came in the first day. I managed to bench 135 pounds, which I was pretty happy with, being probably 120 pounds at the time. I only managed to squat, I think, like 155 or something like that. And we didn't do deadlifting. They were more focused on like hang clean, and I guess they did have a hex bar deadlift, and what I did, I think I did 315 on the hex bar, so nothing spectacular, but I really had nothing to compare it against when I was that young, you know what I mean? Throughout my entire time going through football, in high school, they ended up making somewhat of a chore. Really, you had a lot of guys who would kind of try to skip through pretty much as they could, because you didn't really want to have to, you wanted to hang out with your friends after school, especially when you're in your off season. You don't really feel like hanging around too much. Lifting hurt, you know what I mean? And if strength necessarily wasn't that important to you, you kind of just wanted to do your own thing. And that's the way it was for me. I didn't have a lot of intrinsic motivation to do it. It was mostly extrinsic. So some of the time you have a guy be like, listen, instead of doing 4 sets of this, nobody's looking, you want to do 3. And it's like, yeah, let's get out of here. So you have that sort of thing going on. It reflected in my performance in some of the lifts. In the 4 years that I was in high school football, I went from a 135 bench to 220 with my butt shooting up and stuff like that. And my squat went from that 155 to, I think, 315, maybe a little bit more, like 320, but it was high, you know what I mean? And that might sound like that's a pretty big jump, but those are the newbie gains, and that's like something that anybody could do, just doing even a little bit of work, you know what I mean? But point being is, until I got out of high school football and found that intrinsic motivation in myself to actually want to be bigger and be stronger, for me, I didn't really see any of the results I was looking for. So fast forward a little bit to my senior year, getting ready to go into college. This is still before I really had any big idea of how to train, that sort of thing. So I would look up things like, obviously I was a really big football fan, so my favorite player at the time was Adrian Peterson, so I would look up stuff like his off-season workouts and stuff like that and just try to replicate it. There was no weights or anything like that. It was just set and rep scheme, and somebody arbitrarily probably threw it together. It's not even probably what he was doing. So I ended up doing that, and just going in and being dedicated, doing that sort of thing. No bench press, no squat, no deadlifting, nothing like that. And then one day, my freshman year of college, I just for fun, I go in with my neighbors from across the hall, and we try to do like a 1 rep max on bench press. I hit a 275, and that's doing no bench press work that entire time. So I'm just like, wow, this is kind of fun. I wonder what would actually happen if I actually focused on this. So that's when I met my friends that introduced me to powerlifting at the time. And just meeting them, I started off just working in some of the basic lifts and stuff like that. So I was just working with those 3 basic movements, squat, bench, and deadlift, just a little bit for the first month or 2. And after that, I tested, see where I was at. I ended up around like a 285 bench, a 385 squat, and I was surprised at how good the conventional deadlift actually went up for me, because all I ever pulled was sumo or hex bar. First time I ever did a conventional deadlift, it was 475. So that was, looking back now, that's feels pretty impressive to me. Granted, I was probably hitching and probably stiff-legged because never done that sort of thing before, so I probably did whatever I could to get it up. After I hit some of those numbers, I was hooked. So after that, fast forward a little bit, I remember my next goal was hitting like a double bodyweight bench at the time, and I was weighing around like 165 pounds, going up from that original 120. So this is over the course of like 6 years at this point. So that summer, my main goal was to hit 315 on bench press, and then a 320, because that would be double my body weight. Eventually ended up hitting it, and I just kept wanting to do it even more. So that intrinsic motivation in me kept building up a little bit. Once that happens and you find out like what's actually important to you, you tend to not only gravitate, what is this person telling me, you tend to look into it a little bit yourself. So that's when I really started to do a little bit more research, getting a little bit more well-read in the subject and stuff like that. I think it was a little bit after this point where I had started my my Instagram account. Probably one of the first videos you'll see me doing on there is a really high rack pull. I think it was like 610 pounds, and it looked like a struggle, I'm not gonna lie. After that, progression just kept going up and all the lifts, and I kept getting injured squatting, but I kept going back to it. I remember being stuck at 385 for that long time, getting injured doing this 20 rep squat program. You can probably find a video on my channel about that actually, back when I did it, and that brought me from there to like 435 or 435 to 485, and after that climbed to 500, got injured again, went to 525, got injured again, and now being at around probably a 600-pound squat, hopefully. The point of this whole thing is it's a little bit easy to get wrapped up in some of those big numbers you see somebody else pull. I remember the first time I saw George Lehman and Pete Rubish pulling the huge numbers that they were doing, or the first time I saw Dan Green benching in the 500 pounds. There's even football guys like Trent Richardson coming out of college. They had stopped him in the weight room from benching anything over like 475 because they were afraid he would hurt himself. I couldn't even fathom that sort of number being on the bar, you know what I mean? So don't look at it from other people's perspective, what other people are doing. Just as long as you're improving and it's coming from not a need to necessarily compete with somebody else, whether it be powerlifting or fitness in general, it should come from intrinsic motivation, something from within you that is pushing you to do a little bit better than you were yesterday. I didn't mean this to come off as a corny, inspirational type thing. I just know people who get frustrated. They're just like, I don't know why this hasn't been improving. I feel like I've been doing this for so long, and sometimes it's just a matter of, like, for lack of a better word, the grind, you know what I mean? Even if you're stuck at some place for a long time, you just got to put in the work, and eventually you are going to move past it. You just got to find something within you, get motivated to learn a little bit more about whatever it is that you want to improve at, and things are going to work out. You just have to be patient enough to let it. But yeah, that's all I got for today. I'll be back with more videos next week. In the meantime, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys on Monday.